Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War tournament report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Game 6, which is the final round of Clash of Storms, with my Ratkin versus some Herd. Going into this mission, I had 1 win, 2 draws, and 2 losses, and we were playing Ransack. So here is my opponent's list, the exact list this time. So starting off, we have a horde of Spirit Walkers with Brew of Sharpness, followed by 3 regiments of Longhorns, 2 hordes of Guardian Brutes, a horde of Lycans with the Brew of Strength, 2 Beast Packs, a Chimera with Wings, 2 Centaur Chiefs, one of whom has the Blade of Slashing, then 2 Shamans, both of whom have Heal 5. I actually really think my opponent's list is a pretty strong Herd list. I'm not the biggest on Herd in general, and unfortunately I think that he has a rough matchup against me, as he went heavy on the Guardian Brutes and, Chimera and all this, so he has all this crushing strength that does essentially nothing. So we'll see how the game plays out though, because, I've done it in the past. Here we are, we're back on the lava table that I played my second Abyssal Dwarf player this tournament on, and you can see our Ransack layout. The blue objectives are worth 1 point. The green objectives, I believe you can see 1 in that lower right hand forest. That's worth 2 victory points. And then the red objective in the center of the field, that is worth 3. Starting with my deployment, I have all 3 of my Scurriers and my Assassins sort of central field. Then I have my Demon Spawn on the left there, followed by Blight to the right of him. Then that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units of slaves right there. Behind them are the shock troops, and off to the right are 2 more units of slaves with more shock troops and the warlock. I believe also the weapon team. And all the way over on the left, because there's an objective, I placed an objective in both of those corners on his side of the table while we were setting up, just because I knew that if I won that side of the table, I was just going to place, slaves or Vermintide or something over there and get those points pretty easily. Or if he took that side of the table, again, I can get to those a lot easier than he can, or he'll have to hold units back, and I don't think he can afford to do so. So I've got some Vermintide off on the left, just ready to go over there. With my opponent's deployment, he is running a bunch of the old Skaven models as his Herd. So it's actually a kind of fun battle report here, where we have Skaven models versus Skaven models, one being run as Ratkin and one being run as Herd, both of which I think are perfectly valid. First off, from the left to right, we have his Lycans. Behind them are the 2 Beast Packs. Then to the right of that, or in front, are his Spirit Walkers, which are the Plague Monk models. Then he has 2 regiments of what are the Clan Rat Skaven models. Those are his Longhorns. And to the right of them, the orange ones are also more Longhorns. Behind them is the first Centaur Chief. That is the one without the Blade of Slashing. To the right of the orange Longhorns, that's the Centaur with the Blade of Slashing, or the Bow of Slashing in this case. And then to the right, those 2 units of Rat Ogres. Those are his Guardian Brutes. Behind them are the Shamans, and to the right of that, the Chimera. I'm not sure about my opponent's deployment here, only because it might just be, something that has to happen, because I out-deploy him so hard here. So he started deploying down, I believe, with his Guardian Brutes on the right side, and that sort of dictated what side I was going to go to. Obviously, this right side is the side with the most tokens, but if you control a 2 and the 3 and 1/1, it doesn't matter if your opponent gets the other tokens, you already win, because he'll get a maximum of, 3-5 versus your 3-5-6. So yeah, I didn't really mind if he won this side, although I was obviously going to put all my heavy hitters, because why not? But anyway, so he deployed pretty hard on this flank, and because I can deploy so wide, I just did that. I didn't want to deploy centrally, because I wanted his units to be split by this hill a little bit, and have to maybe stay back to fight my Scurriers. Otherwise, the one thing I'm very proud of in this deployment is that I finally put Blight forward, which is, a lot of times I did put my shock troops behind the slaves again, but that's just because I need slaves to take Guardian Brute charges. But a lot of times against melee lists, I'll put my hordes, I'll still be running in that, please don't shoot me way, and I'll put my hordes behind my regiments of tunnel slaves, and that's just not necessary when my opponent has, I think, literally no shooting, except for, obviously, heal and Bane Chant, which you can't cast on me. So, anyway, moving on. Turn 1, it looks like the herd got turn 1. On the left there, he runs his beast packs forward to block off the blight, or to block off, his, Spirit Walkers and his Lycans from being charged, keeping them slightly out of range of that demon spawn. I probably still wouldn't have gone for a demon spawn on Lycan charge this early, but, you know, I might have, who knows. And otherwise, he just sort of advances a little bit with his Guardian Brutes and his Longhorns. Again, I think that this might have been a bit of a mistake to play pensively, just because I have a lot of units, but they're not very good combatants, except for the Assassin, the Demon Spawn, and the 3 Hordes. But currently on that right-hand flank, my right hand, my Hordes are trapped behind the Slaves, which means that he can push pretty hard into me, and I think that's important in a scenario that's so about table or point control, right? We're trying to take these objectives, and the best way to take an objective is just to make it so your opponent can't move over to them. So, anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Otherwise, his beast packs are just rolling up in front of all my Scurriers and making him mad. His Chimera just realizes that he's on the wrong side of the table and scoots all the way to the left. He's facing towards the Scurriers. So, with Ratkin turn 1, I have a flank charge onto one of the beast packs with some Scurriers, the thrown weapon Scurriers. So I decide to take that. Otherwise, everything just advances. You can see my right-hand side where the other shock troops are now. There was a perfect spot there, so a horde of 20 mil infantry could walk through. So I have the 2 over there, and I pushed hard. Everything went 12, with the exception of the units that are going over terrain, because, I don't have Pathfinder. Everything else just went as fast as it can. That's how I like to play. So, yeah, I went into the side of the beast pack here because I think that my Scurriers can probably do it in one hit, even with... Because they'll get, 16 attacks on 5s with Vicious, and then it's... So 5s and 2s, 5s and 3s, something like that, to get through with Vicious. So I think I can blow apart that beast pack, and then the other beast pack I'm just going to shoot with all the Scurriers and Assassin and probably a lightning bolt, just to make sure that he has no chaff, because then I can just roll in front of his Lycan with my Scurriers. He can still go around using a corkscrew charge, but I'm not at all threatened by that idea, as my Assassin, he is already in the front, he's in the front of the Assassin, so he can't charge due to where my Scurriers are, and anywhere else he goes, my Demon Spawn will get to him, and maybe even the Blight. So, yeah, I'm not really afraid of it. At the end of my turn, I get rid of one of the beast packs with my shooting, and I do 4 wounds with my Scurriers on the other one, the flank charge, but I unfortunately don't even waver that unit. A waver would have been fantastic. That's exactly what I want. But yeah, didn't get the waver either, so that beast pack is free to do what it wants. Yep, just showing off his unit. Actually, we use the exact same brand of unit trays too. It's fun. Turn 2. So turn 2, you can't see it right here, but that beast pack that I failed to waver runs off to the left to go fight my Vermintide. So, you know, little chaff v chaff over there. Otherwise, he sends the Centaur Chief, the first Centaur Chief, into my Scurriers with thrown weapons. His Lycans decide to do a pretty good move here, where they run 18 over to, you can see it poking out over there, that little crater piece of terrain. They run over there and use their nimble to face back towards my battle line. Or no. Or maybe he used his nimble to get over there. Anyway, he's facing away from fighting, so he knows he's going to lose a turn, but now he's in my back lines, which is something that I think more people should be, less afraid of. Like, using your combat units to skip a turn, but be in a rear or flank charge is, that's just good. It's a good plan. Otherwise, it looks like the Longhorns went forward and decided to charge some slaves along with the Blade of Slashing Centaur. But his Spirit Walkers stay back. And I'm not sure about that, because he decided to stay back with the Spirit Walkers, I'm guessing, to hide from the Blight. But my Blight are currently on a piece an obstruction, like a wall, And that means that if I charge, I'm gonna take a hindered charge. So 30 attacks on 5s, that's 10-ish hits, and then he's defense 3. I could get a Bane Chant, maybe? I don't actually know, I doubt I can. So I do around 3 wounds, which is not enough for that. I think they're a dash 23 or some crazy defense, and then they'll blow right through me with that Brew of Sharpness. So I'm not entirely sure about that idea, but, you know, plays to my benefit. Otherwise, on the right-hand side, again, the Guardian Brutes decide to stay away from my slaves, and I did make it so the slaves were slightly at a charge range, but I might have pushed forward with the Guardian Brutes were they mine, just at least with one of them, to make sure that the slaves are fighting me on my side of the table instead of on his. Anyway, that's what happens. At the end of combat, he ends up doing 3 wounds to my Scurriers with his Centaur and wavers them. Then he does 2 wounds to the slaves with the Centaur and fails to waver them. And then both Longhorns do 6 and 6 to my slaves, but fail to waver either of them, which is very unfortunate for my opponent because I did stagger those units, so I can corkscrew into flanks. So, moving on to Ratkin turn 2. I do in fact go for these flank charges. I get a flank charge and a front charge onto the center Longhorns, the red ones. The orange ones eat a flank charge from some other slaves. I send some slaves over into his Guardian Brutes. The ones that you can see in frame are actually, those guys passed their yellow bellied and charged. They're an inch away right now just because I doubt they can kill or do anything to Guardian Brutes, and they won't actually fit with his models, so we just did this instead. But the rightmost slaves fail their yellow belly and just sit over there. Out of frame is the fight you'll never see, which is the Vermintide versus the Beast Pack. His Beast Pack did do, I think, a wound or 2 to my Vermintide, but failed to waver them, so I countercharge into them. And my Scurriers turn around to shoot at his Lycans just to get a wound or 2 on him. And otherwise, I get a charge into another individual with my assassin, always fun. And my demon spawn just flies over his line and turns around. I forfeit the turn, but I'm in his rear, so feel good about that. And my blight walk over the obstruction that they were on, just to, make it so they're not eating hindered charges. And my Scurriers that were wavered back up a little bit, just to make it so he can't thread that gap onto my blight. He'll have to kill slaves or Scurriers. At the end of combat, and I did countercharge with my slaves into his Centaur Chief. At the end of combat, I do 2 wounds to his Centaur Chief with my Assassin, and I think waver it. Then I do a few wounds, it looks like 4 or 5 wounds to his Spirit Walkers with my Scurriers. Then I do 5 wounds to his Blade of Slashing Centaur with my slaves. Unfortunately, I don't roll, I think they're a 12-14 or an 11-13. Either way, I don't roll the waiver. Oh no, I do get the waiver there. The big unfortunate thing is that I charge with that flank and front charge into the red Spirit Walkers. I double one it. So I don't think there's a picture of it, but yeah, I double one that, which is always a shame. I like to get those free slave kills as I see them, but I don't in that case. And I also failed to waiver the slaves, the orange Longhorns with my slaves. Granted, that was a hindered charge, so not the best. And then my slaves do nothing to Guardian Brutes. Turn 3. So turn 3. I also forgot to mention my Vermintide, which again I don't think are ever pictured, have killed off his Beast Pack over there, the wounded one, and are now rolling towards the objective as they chose to pursue. So the herd turn 3. He turns his Lycans back around to charge where he wants. He gets a charge. He gets a charge. If we roll a picture back, or 2, that's a flank charge with his horde of Spirit Walkers onto those slaves, and he takes it along with a front charge from his Longhorns, and from his Longhorns. And the slave unit is not there. They get obliterated. And then the Chimera just decided to fly over and turn around to look at turn around. The double one Longhorns kill off some slaves. The orange Longhorns kill the slaves that had flank charged the red Longhorns, and then turn to face the slaves that had flank charged them. The Guardian Brutes choose to charge into my slaves to try to drop them off, both units. And I think that's about it. Yeah. So at the end of combat, yeah, it's as you can see, he kills 1, 2, 3 slave units and gets some position. Ratkin turn 3. I get a rear charge with my Blight into his Spirit Walkers, and that's pretty bad. If we roll a picture back, he couldn't turn in such a way where he doesn't either get or eat a flank from my Demon Spawn or a rear from my Blight. So he decides instead to just take the rear here, which might not have been the best idea. As the Blight get a rear charge, my Demon Spawn essentially gets to not be in that fight and flank charge a different unit. My Assassin goes back into the Centaur Chief that he was fighting, and my slaves Yellow Belly to charge into his Longhorns, which is unfortunate, but I get some slaves into a Shaman, which is fun, and Shock Troops into some Guardian Brutes, which I don't expect them to kill them, even with my access to Bane Chant, as they have very high nerve, so... But I do want to get some damage going here, and I plan to finish off the damage unit with shooting while my shock troops fight off these Longhorns for a turn. Then my slaves can just gather around the other unit. My Demon Spawn, walks right through the Longhorns. My Blight walk right through the Spirit Walker Horde. Yeah, that's, 90 attacks, I want to say. And this is the end of the turn. I actually did get my Scurriers all shoot at his werewolves or his Lycans, and I do a couple damage, but I do get a waver there, so they're wavered sitting in that piece of terrain. And the luckier part, so I get the Blight kill, I get the Demon Spawn kill, but more importantly, I get the Shock Troopers is just a front charge into some Guardian Brutes. I get that kill, which is frankly very surprising to me. It's, but that's what happens. You have a large number of dice with a bunch of rerolls, and you can spike them. Turn 3 for the I'm sorry, this I don't know why these set of pictures got repeated. Weird. So turn 4 for the herd. On the left hand side, his Lycans just sort of sit there. I failed to waver the Centaur Chief fighting my Assassin, so he gets a countercharge there. His Chimera just flies over to go bug some Scurriers. He charges into the slaves with his orange Longhorns. Oh, I forgot to mention my weapon team, I did set up my Warlock so it could lightning bolt as well if I needed it. But my weapon team fired into the red Longhorns that I needed double ones before. I get at least one wound onto them, so they were toasted. But he takes a Centaur charge into the Blade of Slashing Centaur into my back horde of shock troops, just to try to block them off from getting the Longhorns. And lastly, I think he countercharged with his Shaman, because I did one wound with my slaves. And the Guardian Brutes go into the front of the shock troops. At the end of combat, it's as you see here, the Centaur Chief versus Assassin. I don't think he hit me. The Centaur Chief versus my shock troops. He does 2 wounds, but doesn't get the boxcar. The Longhorns, the orange Longhorns, kind of whiff and kind of don't. I mean, they only have 12 attacks, but they don't do enough damage to kill off their slaves, and in fact fail to even waver them. But the big news is that his Guardian Brutes versus my horde of shock troops, he does a lot of damage. That's like at least 13 wounds up there, but fails to even waver them. So, things are looking rough. On Ratkin turn, oh, nope, I'm sorry, he did waver my Assassin. Yeah, you can see it now. But on Ratkin turn here, I charge the rear of the Longhorns with my Demon Spawn and the front with slaves. I countercharge with my shock troops into the Centaur Chief, and I countercharge with my shock troops into the Guardian Brutes. Otherwise, I'm just sort of moving out of my way with things like the weapon team and some slaves. On the left-hand side, you can't see it, but my Vermintide's still trucking towards an invisible objective. I believe it's also a 2-point objective, so even worse. And my Scurriers all turn to just keep shooting at the Lycans, hoping to get more lucky waivers. This is the end of combat. I blow right through the second Lycan horde with the same horde of shock troops. My Demon Spawn and slaves kill off the last of the Longhorns, and my other slaves do a second wound to some Shamans, so fun there. And the last shock troops kill off that Centaur Chief. So at the end of turn 4 here, My opponent only has his 2 shamans, his one of his centaur chiefs, a chimera, and his lycans. And my scurriers did in fact manage to get a waiver on those lycans again. So, you know, I'll just leave them in that piece of terrain doing nothing. Seems good. Turn 5. Turn 5 sees the lycans get some regen. He gets a flank charge on some scurriers with his chimera. And then I believe his shamans just decide to run away to get some point denial. And his centaur chief goes into the assassin just to mop up some points. And at the end of combat, yeah, he kills the assassin with his centaur chief. His chimera kills off some scurriers and turns to face the next round of them. And his shamans are still trucking away. On Ratkin turn 5, I run my shock troops over to one objective. I charge one of the shamans with some slaves. And it looks like, I think I took my scurriers and decided to just shoot at the lycans some more. Yeah. And everything else is just walking towards objectives. I have some slaves that walked back to the green objective in that little piece of woods that you can see on the right there. And turn 6 rolls around. Turn 6, the... and I'll have you know, I did in fact waiver those lycans again. So they're just permanently wavered. It's pretty funny. His last turn, he charges with the centaur chief and the chimera into my 2 scurrier regiment or troops and kills them both. And otherwise, I think one of his shamans charged into some slaves. And my turn 6, I just get onto objectives. I did charge the slaves into the shaman up there, but I forgot to roll it. So, you know, too bad. And that's the end of the game. So I end up with 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 10 objective points versus my opponent's 0. So it's a pretty crushing victory in terms of objective points. I go up to I believe an 18 here, a 17 or an 18, and then we count up the victory points, and unfortunately not killing that shaman makes this just a 20-1 victory instead of a 21-0. But I'd prefer my opponent have at least 1 point, especially when we're down here in the middle to bottom tables where it's not really relevant. So yeah, I thought this was a pretty enjoyable game, if not a little lopsided due to some, the rolls weren't great, but they were just that slight above average that just starts to snowball out of control. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this, and happy with the end of the tournament getting a 2-2-2. I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I will be doing a follow-up report on my my thoughts on the tournament and my list in the next video. So I hope to see you then. Bye.